Hello there, FFTCG community. I'm Judge Jared, and you're watching episode 18 of Rules Roundup, where I go over rules questions that were asked in the unofficial global FFTCG Discord server this week, and give you the answers to those questions, as well as getting into the rules behind those interactions and why those answers are what they are, as a way to both test your own rules knowledge, as well as how well you know those rules bits and answers, so that you would be able to explain the same thing to somebody if you were answering a question, in a way that's hopefully a little bit more than just trust me, bro. So we're going to go over 10 questions again this week, which will give you a chance to kind of quiz yourself if you want to. You don't have to. If you just want to sit back and just kind of absorb this video and just kind of enjoy yourself, no pressure. But if you do want to test yourself, then you can give yourself a score out of 10 over the course of all this and see how well you knew these. And I'm going to trust you to grade yourself on this. It's been an exciting week again. We're still very early in the era of Gunslinger in the Abyss. It's been almost 2 weeks since the official release date for it. I know some areas are still waiting due to delays and stuff, which my heart goes out to you. But I think mostly globally, it's out there at this point. And in addition to that, last weekend we had an interesting little mini meta where the new bans and restriction went into effect, but the cards were not legal yet a week ago. And so there was some LQs, some local qualifiers, where Opus 26 was not yet legal, but the bans and restriction changes were there. So we had a 2-day meta, essentially, from a competitive standpoint. I got to play in one of those LQs, and it was interesting, and it was fun. I'm glad I got to have that opportunity for that just brief little slice of time. And got a chance to play my iteration of the Dancers deck. Did a lot better than I expected, and it was good times. So apparently it was a good week for Dancers in general. So I don't know, that little slice of meta was a good time to be a Dancers player, I guess. But anyway, so we're going to dive into the questions, which includes a lot of people looking over stuff from Opus 26. I do need to point out that if you haven't watched it already, earlier this week I did put out a video called Fact Checking, and that's where I was going over the frequently asked questions section of the official page, what they had put up, all the entries for Opus 26, of which there were 38 of them, and go over all those entries and kind of all of the stuff behind what those entries meant, and if they were interesting or not, if they were correct or not, because spoiler alert, not all of them were correct. So you should go watch that if you haven't already. I ended up not just beating my record for longest video so far, but I just blew right past it, so that record's probably going to stand for a while. If you haven't watched it already, then go check that out. Moving along, let's get into the questions from this week. Question number 1 is, does Gutsco remove the cards face up or face down? So Gutsco has an effect that says, when Gutsco enters the field or attacks, remove the top card of your deck from the game. He also has another one. This is not important for the question, but just in case you're not familiar with him, it says, when Gutsco leaves the field, add all the cards removed by Gutsco's ability to your hand. So the question here is about the first one, which is that you remove the top card of your deck from the game, and that's all you do up until he leaves the field. So the question here is, what happens with that card that you remove from the top of your deck? And it's possible that this question could be because, when you're moving it from the top of your deck, like it's face down most of the time, but most of the time if you're doing things coming from the deck, we do flip them up. So the answer to this is based in what the rules are about different zones. And we're going to talk about a concept called public zones. So this is something that's kind of beyond just Gutsco, but just getting into the broader rules around the game. So some zones are called public zones, and public zones by default, all the cards in them are face up and are viewable at all times by both players. Examples of this are like the break zone. Both break zones are public zones, so the cards in them are face up, and either player can look at any of the cards in those zones at any time. The field is also a public zone. The removed from play zones are also public zones. The damage zones are public zones, and kind of the weird stepchild of public zones is the Limit Break deck. Believe it or not, is actually a public zone, but it has its own kind of special rules there, where it's a public zone, but of course the cards all in it start off face down, and then some of them turn up over the course of the game. So it's a public zone, but your opponent is only allowed to look at the cards in it that are face up. You can look at your own cards face down or face up at any point in time, but your opponent can only ever look at the cards that are face up in the Limit Break deck, but it is still considered a public zone. Examples of zones that are not public are your hand. So your hand is definitely not a public zone, and your deck. Your deck is also not a public zone. Oh, I should say the stack is also a public zone. I know a lot of times people don't think about the stack because it's more of a conceptual thing, and usually cards are not physically on it unless they're summons. But it is still a zone, and it's still public. So the vast majority of zones in the game are public. So basically the exceptions being your hand and your deck. And so if you caught all of that, you'll catch that the remove from play zone is also a public zone. Everything in there goes face up. Now, I will point out the thing about Gutsco and effects like his that remove cards from the game, but you need to track them. Other cards like this are Man in Black. That will remove something and allow you to cast it later. Or the Wind Zinane that steals cards from your opponent's deck and then allows you to cast them later. Things like that. People tend to place those cards separate because, again, you need to track them. You don't want them to get mixed up with the other cards that are removed from the game. But in rules terms, in game terms, they are in the remove from play zone. Like if we were being 100% playing perfectly the way the rules are written, then anytime we had something removed by Gutsco, removed by Man in Black, removed by whatever, it would be in that remove from play zone along with every other card that's been removed from play. In practical terms, it's not very good to do that because you will very easily lose track of which ones are from which effects. So I get why people do it. I do it myself. It's one of those things where I'm not going to be like a stickler on the rules on that one just because in practical terms it doesn't make sense. But we have to remember from a rules standpoint that those cards are in the remove from play zone with anything else that's removed from play. Like we've put them aside for tracking purposes, but they are in that zone. Since they are in that zone and it's a public zone, it means that they are face up and everybody can see them. The exception to this is if a card does explicitly tell you to do it face down. An example of that would be Lonnie, the fire forward that her effect, specifically when she enters the field, it tells your opponent to remove the top card of their deck face down. So it calls out explicitly on the card to remove from the deck face down. Remove the top card from your deck from the game face down, and then in that case the Lonnie player, it tells in the effect that they get to look at that card at any time that they want to, but the opponent does not. So by default, anything removed from play is going to be face up. It's going to be in a public zone there, and the exceptions are pretty few and far between, like the Lonnie. But so just a simple question with a long answer, but just so you understand the concept of public zones and what they are and which ones are not public. Next question is, if an X burst triggers, would either of these Vanilles be able to tax it? I have to laugh because I feel like this is a question from some. I don't mean to like slight the person who asked the question, but in my head, it feels like the question of somebody who is just devastated that Yuna was restricted and Cecil was banned, and is just kind of clinging to like, hey, you got any more of those taxing effects? Any more taxing effects out there? Like somebody who's just like dying to tax stuff. I don't know. I don't know if that's why they asked it, but that's just what played in my head. So anyway, Vanille, being the saboteur that she is all about sabotaging what your opponent's trying to do. So let's go over what each one of these do. The first one is she's got an action ability. It says dull active Vanille. Choose one opponent's auto ability. If your opponent doesn't pay 2 CP, cancel its effect. The second one is the Vanille here has a dull icon ability. It says choose one summon. If your opponent doesn't pay 2 CP, cancel its effect. So the question is, if an X burst triggers, would either of these Vanilles be able to tax it? I assume when they're asking this question, they're talking about X bursts from damage, because there is, of course, that distinction between X bursts from damage and X bursts that are put on the stack via an effect like Lunafreya or Axstar. But I can answer both here just to be thorough with it. So in the case of damage, the thing about X-Burst from damage to remember is that a damage that causes an X-Burst, the X-Burst is going to resolve immediately. It doesn't use the stack. So its entire effect is going to do the whole thing, and then after that, when the dust is cleared, now somebody gets priority, the turn player gets priority, and then people can start adding things to the stack if they want to. So because of that, just by the nature of the fact that it resolves immediately, you're not going to have the opportunity to use an action ability to tax the X-Burst, because by the time you even get priority to do it, we're way past, like, that X-Burst has resolved. It is done. It has left the building. So that's the answer there. Now the answer for when we have an X-Burst effect that is put on the stack via Lunafreya or Axstar, the answer is still no, but it's for a completely different reason. The reason why the answer is no here is because when those X-Burst effects get put on the stack via those two cards that I mentioned, it goes on the stack and it retains the information of what it's from, meaning that the X-Burst effect knows that it came from an ability or knows that it came from a summon for the purposes of things that, like, can't be chosen by abilities or can't be chosen by summons. However, the effect itself on the stack is not an ability or a summon. Doesn't matter what it came from. It's not an ability or summon. It's just an effect. Because of that, the thing about both these Vanilles is that both of them have to choose either an ability or a summon. The first one says choose one opponent's auto ability. The thing is, when that effect is on the stack because of Lunafreya, it's not an auto ability, so you don't have a valid target. Same thing with the second Vanille. Her ability says choose one summon. If you had an X-Burst effect that was from a summon that you put on there because Lunafreya triggered it, it's on the stack, but it's not a summon, it's an effect. So again, the answer is no, but for completely separate reasons depending on when this X-Burst is being put on there. So yeah, bummer if you're trying to tax these things, but that's your answer on both cases. Next one is Biggs. It says, does Biggs' effect of this forward cannot be broken stop the forward from being broken from taking damage, or does it only stop effects that explicitly break? Biggs has this ability. It says, when two or more job avalanche operative forwards you control form a party attack, draw one card, and then all forwards in that party gain this forward cannot be broken until the end of the turn. So what this question boils down to here is when a character, doesn't have to be a forward, when a character has, actually we'll make it be a forward because we're asking about damage. When a forward has an effect or an ability on them that says they cannot be broken, what does that mean? What things will break them? What things won't break them? What things will move them? All of that, right? So let's talk about that kind of broadly so that we get the Biggs answer, but also it works for things like the 7 CP Ardent that nobody plays, or anything else that just makes it so something can't be broken for some period of time. When an effect says that it can't be broken, the obvious thing is that if there's an effect that says to break a forward, it doesn't work on that forward, right? So that's the kind of, like, I hope everybody is with me on that one without much explanation. If there's an Odin and it says, like, choose one forward, break it, and then Biggs has already made it so they have this ability that says this forward cannot be broken, then Odin is not going to break that forward. All right, with me so far? Now with damage, the thing about damage is that damage in and of itself does not break forwards. Like, you can do 30,000 damage to something, and the fact that it received 30,000 damage does not break it in and of itself. What breaks it is that after the effect resolves that dealt that 30,000 damage to it, we have the rule processes that get checked. And I've gone over this before, but rule processes are whenever somebody's about to gain priority, rule processes get checked, and they're checking for a few different things. I think there's like 7 of them. I don't have them memorized off the top of my head, but they're checking for things like, has a player received 7 points of damage? Has a player tried to draw from their deck when they didn't have any cards left in the deck? Have they taken damage when they didn't have any cards left in their deck? Do they have 2 or more light or dark cards on the field at the same time and they don't have an effect that's allowing them to do that? Do they have 2 cards of the same name on the field at the same time that don't have the multiplay symbol, and there's not an effect that's allowing them to do that? or I guess a rule if you're playing title or something. There's probably a sixth one that I'm forgetting in there. And then the last one is, are there any forwards that have received damage that is equal to or greater than their power? And if the answer is yes, then Rule Processes breaks that forward and puts it in, and then it goes to the break zone because it's been broken. So there's that little disconnect where the damage itself doesn't break it, but then when Rule Processes get checked, it goes, oh, you took 30,000 damage. You are toast. And so you've been broken, and now you go into the break zone. But that process does explicitly use the word break in it. So what that means is that if Biggs, his ability did resolve, then whatever forwards receive that effect, or that ability actually, they say it's to gain it. So if they receive that ability, then if they took the 30,000 damage, they are in fact not toast. They might be toasty, but they're still there. And so yeah, they do not get broken by taking damage, because taking damage, what makes you get broken in the first place is that the rules do say that, okay, you've been broken. The caveat we have to give here, of course, is that when there are effects that say to put something into the break zone, that is not the same as breaking. So if somebody casts good old Opus 3 Famfrit that says each player select one forward they control, put it into the break zone, that is not breaking. That is putting into the break zone. They're two different things. And a forward who had received this ability from Biggs is still eligible to be put into the break zone, because it's more about zone movement, in the same way that some effects will tell you to return it to your hand, or tell it to put it into the bottom of its owner's deck or the top of its owner's deck. So when something says to put it into the break zone, that is a zone movement thing, where it's just telling you, hey, this card is in this zone and we're instructing you to move it to a different zone. So that's not breaking, even though it seems like it. It's like put into the break zone. If they had worded it as move to the break zone, maybe that would make this less confusing. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. But like, if instead of saying put it into the break zone, I said move it to the break zone, people might not confuse that and think that it breaks it. I don't know. We're not going to be changing the word on it, because the 26 sets in, if they've been using this phrasing, it's not going anywhere. So yeah, that's what it means to not be able to be broken. New card. All right. Ashe says, if you use Ashe Opus 26 on the same forward twice, opponent is using a 10k ping. Is it 8k or 6k? So Ashe has an action ability. It says, dull one active category 12 character, choose one forward. During this turn, the next damage dealt to it is reduced by 2,000 instead. So what they're doing here, the situation we're imagining is, let's say that they have, it's a 10k ping. So it sounds like Spit Flare to me. If you've been playing against Clive and Ifrit, you know what deals 10k. So let's say that they, or maybe they just played the Ifrit to the field. But either way, Ifrit's probably the perpetrator here of a 10k ping. So Clive is just primed into Ifrit. Ifrit entered the field. It's chosen Ashe, say, to deal 10k. And then in response to that, the Ashe player is dulling their first activating the ability once and dulling a category 12 character, let's say Larsa. And then that resolves and it says, okay, the next time that we chose Ashe, next time Ashe receives damage this turn, it's going to be reduced by 2,000. And then after that resolves, they go, okay, you know what? We're going to do it again. We're going to dull Ashe herself, and we're going to choose herself. And now we have a second instance of this effect that resolved that says, during this turn, the next damage dealt to it being Ashe, is reduced by 2,000 instead. So we have these two replacement effects. They're just floating out there. And then after that's all resolved, now we finally resolve the Ifrit effect. And we go, okay, we're dealing 10,000 damage to Ashe. And of course, the way that replacement effects work, which is whenever we have an effect that uses the word instead, which this one does, it's a replacement effect. So whenever we have multiple of those, the player that is receiving the effect, or the controller of the character that is receiving the effect, gets to choose the order to apply the replacement effects in, which doesn't matter in this scenario because it's two identical effects. So, I mean, order them however you want. But the overall point is that all of those effects will be applied to the instance of damage. It's not just going to be like, oh, we received it once and we have 2 of these, so we're just using the first one. Like, no, both of them are going to hone in on the what's being replaced, which is damage. They're both going to be applied sequentially. So we started off with 10,000 damage. You apply the first replacement effect. Oh, it's down to 8,000 now. And then you apply the second replacement effect. Oh, it's down to 6,000 now. So after all that, we're going to end up with 6,000 damage being dealt to Ashe, and for the moment, she lives. So yeah, if you're using this Ashe, you can absolutely stack those action abilities to make it so that things just get reduced further. Makes it harder to get rid of her. Another new card here, Joshua. The question for Joshua is, if my opponent has no forwards, can he still Amaterasu Joshua when he enters? Joshua has an auto ability that says when Joshua enters the field, choose one forward opponent controls, deal it 2,000 damage for each job icon in your break zone and or job icon you own removed from the game. It's always fun answering questions about new cards. That being said, the thing about this Joshua is this is not a ruling or a situation that is at all unique to Joshua. So it's great that we're answering it, but just I want you to think of the fact that this is actually going to be universally true for basically any auto ability that chooses targets, so that we can kind of apply this broadly. So the rules around this is that when you have an auto ability that triggers and it chooses targets, it does trigger still, even though you don't have a target. So Joshua enters the field and we've triggered this up, ding, and then the turn player gains priority, and then we go to put it on the stack. What happens is when we go to put it on the stack, it does, it's there technically, temporarily, and then it sees that you have no valid targets, and because there's no valid targets, the rules will automatically remove this auto ability from the stack immediately. So it's like it tries to do its whole routine, and then it goes, oh, wait, nope, never mind, I have no targets, and then it just removes itself before anybody has priority, before anybody can take any actions. So the answer is no, you cannot cast Amaterasu on it, because by the time whichever player it is that's trying to do it has priority, the auto ability has already removed itself from the stack. It's already just self-canceled, basically. So, I mean, that being said, if your opponent's playing Joshua to the field and you don't control any forwards, then that's just an awkward play in the first place. You're paying 3 CP for a 5k forward. And I guess you just really, really want to prime into Phoenix, maybe. But yeah, so any auto ability that chooses, if you don't have the correct number of targets that you are required to choose when it is going on the stack, it will remove itself before anybody gets a chance to take an action. All right, next up, a question about lightning. More new cards here. We're in a kind of a little run of new card questions. This one says, do other cards that say when a party of yours attacks trigger from the new lightning or not, because she builds a party after an attack? So this new lightning has a very unique effect. We've never seen it before in 26 sets, and she's the only one in the set that has it. And that effect is that her auto ability says when lightning attacks, you may play one category 13 forward of cost 6 or less from your hand onto the field dull, forming a party with lightning and attacking. You can play a forward of any element. At the end of the turn, return it to its owner's hand. The part about this is unique is that it's played onto the field, forming a party with lightning and attacking. That's what we've never had before. We've obviously had tons of effects that play something to the field, even ones that play something to the field dull, but we've not had something that plays something to the field and says, hey, you just entered the field and now you're attacking and you're partied with her. So that's what's new about this, which is why there's so many questions. And the question here about whether or not we would have a trigger from a party attacking, the answer is that no, we're not going to trigger those things. And the reason why is because the trigger event for those abilities, and as an example, by the way, of those abilities, there's the Light Noctis, the 2CP Light Noctis, that has an auto ability that triggers when a party that of yours attacks. There's also the Water Backup Kais, has an auto ability that triggers when you declare an attack with the party, things like that. So the thing is that those trigger when you declare an attack with a party. And the thing that's not super intuitive or obvious about this lightning is that when she plays the new forward in, it doesn't come in and then declare an attack with lightning. It just comes in to an attack that's already in place. It's already happening, and then lightning plays them and it goes, we're attacking now, and then the new forward's like, okay, I guess we're attacking. But they weren't there to declare a party attack, and they're not declaring when they enter the field. So assuming that lightning was not in a party to begin with when she attacked, when the attack was declared, it wasn't a party attack. It was a single forward attacking. So anything that explicitly triggers off of a party attacking is not going to trigger when lightning attacks. And then when the forward is played in and it parties with her and is now attacking, that is not declaring a new attack. So because of that, the trigger event is still not happening for cards like Noctis and Kais and things like that. So that's the answer there. Now, because this is a question about lightning, I am honor bound to do the thing. You know what the thing is? You know what time it is? You know what time it is. You've seen this enough, right? It's shameless plug time. That's right. Yes, it's shameless plug time. And why is it shameless plug time? Because I did an entire video about that lightning. Believe it or not. Did an entire video about her and that crazy effect and all of the things about it that are new and all the things we had to ask about, including questions like that one about whether abilities trigger from not just from party attacks, but in general when the forward enters there. So yeah, I answered all those questions in a video that is called Let's Talk About Lightning. So you should go watch that if you haven't already. And even if you have, you know what? It's probably not a bad idea to watch it again, because I have a feeling she's going to be all over the meta, not just in general, but also this weekend in Portland at the Materia Cup, which I'm going to be judging at. I'm one of the judges for that. So probably going to be a lot of lightning. I know that category 13 stuff is like already happening on like Octagon and stuff. So you should go check out that video. That's my shameless plug. Go do that after you finish watching this, or if at the very least, if you're gonna watch that now, then like pause this one, open up a new tab, go watch that, then come back, and I'll be here waiting for you. All right, moving along. Is there any mechanical importance why a card like Barret says dull active card name instead of just using the dull symbol? Is it functionally identical? All right, so Barret here has an action ability that the cost for it says dull active Barret, and then the effect isn't important, but I'll read it anyway. Choose one forward opponent controls, break it. You can only use this ability if a job avalanche operative you controlled has been put from the field into the break zone this turn. So the question is about the cost here. The cost says dull active Barret. And the vast majority of the time when we have something like this, they don't go through the trouble of writing out dull active this card. They just put the dull symbol, right? And they just call it a day, right? It saves on ink, saves on text. It's just pop that dull symbol on there, right? So they're asking, what's the mechanical importance about it? And the vast majority of how this works mechanically is the same, but there's one extremely important difference between when it's worded this way and when it's got the dull symbol. And that's that the dull symbol has some special rules associated with it. In particular, the fact that the dull symbol, you cannot use any ability with the dull symbol unless the character has haste or you have continuously controlled that character since the start of your most recent turn. So what that means is if that character entered the field this turn, even if it was like on the field earlier, like you started the turn with it and then it left the field and came back, if it entered the field this turn, or on your most recent turn, if it's your opponent's turn and it entered the field on your previous turn, but you didn't control it the whole turn, then you cannot use that dull icon ability. When it's worded like this, because it doesn't use the dull icon symbol, there's no associated rules around that. So that means that this Barret, when he enters the field, you can just dull him right away. Just knock yourself out. Go ahead and dull him and do the thing. So it's not, I mean, it's functionally identical in terms of that, like, if the Barret was out for a full turn anyway, then yeah, there's no difference. But if it's the turn they entered the field, you can do it now. So it's like this kind of quasi haste, not really, but you can do it right away. And so the thing to keep in mind when we have abilities like that don't use the dull icon and they just are worded like this, If you're asking yourself why would they do that? It's a balancing thing, to be honest. It makes the effect more powerful if you have the opportunity to use it the moment that he enters the field. So if they want the card to be stronger for whatever reason, then they can make that option, to do that, to go, okay, we want this card to be stronger, so we're going to allow you to do it sooner. Or if they have an effect and they're worried about the effect being too strong or the card being too strong, and like, well, we like this, but we don't want them to just be able to like slam it down and just like go right into it, then they'll use the dull icon symbol. And so that's like, okay, this is an effect and it's cool, but you're going to have to wait to use it, or you're going to have to jump through hoops to give them haste. Or if it's a card that already has haste, they don't have to necessarily change it from being the dull icon symbol. Although there's, I guess, niche situations where they have haste, but they have the dull icon symbol, but then something causes them to lose the haste, so now they can't do it. I don't know. But yeah, it's most of the time it's the same, but where there's a difference is the turn that the thing enters, whatever card it is. The turn that it enters, huge difference between whether you can use it right away or whether you can't use it right away. All right, next question is, hi there. Does Opus 16 Sarah MOBIUS trigger once if I gain 2 crystals through a card like Lucio, or does it trigger twice and I can check the top card for backup twice? So Sarah MOBIUS has an auto ability that says when you gain a crystal, reveal the top card of your deck. If it is a backup, add it to your hand. If it is not a backup, put it on the top or bottom of your deck. So every time you gain a crystal, she triggers, you check the top card of your deck, and then you do whatever with it depending on if it's a backup or not. Lucio has an auto ability that says the beginning of the attack phase during each of your turns, Lucio gains plus 2,000 power until the end of the turn, gain 2 crystals. So Lucio's auto ability, by the time you finish resolving it, you gain 2 crystals. Now you gain 2 crystals off of one effect, you gained it basically like simultaneously. So the question is, does Sarah trigger once or twice? Because you're gaining 2 crystals. So is it like one instance of gaining crystals, so you only get to trigger it once, or does she just care about the number of crystals that you gained? And the wording on this, when you're trying to figure out which one it is, you're always looking at if the trigger event includes the phrase or more. Those are magical words there, essentially, or more. So her effect is phrased as when you gain a crystal, that's the trigger event, and then it goes on from there. So because the trigger event for her is just when you gain a crystal, that means it's literally every time you gain a crystal. And if you gained multiple off of the same effect, good for you. Each one of those crystals you gain is going to make her auto ability trigger, because the trigger is just gaining a crystal, and you did that twice. If her ability had said, when you gain 1 or more crystals, reveal the top card of your deck, if it was phrased like that, then because it was one instance of gaining crystals, but it happened to be 2 of them, then she would only trigger once. So similar to the Barrett thing where I mentioned that there's like, it's mostly the same how things resolve, but there's a balance difference between one or the other. There's a balance difference here on these type of effects on whether they say or more or not. So when something says or more, it's inherently weaker than if it didn't, because you can see that in the case of this Sarah, where if her effect said when you gain a crystal or when you gain 1 or more crystals, that would not be as powerful as the way that she is written, where it's just when you gain a crystal, because the number of triggers changes. So, yeah, with her, you'd have that effect on it stacked twice. You'd resolve the first one of it, and look at the top card of your deck, and then do whatever with it, and then you would resolve the second one. Somebody did point out the silliness of that if you have Sarah MOBIUS on the field and you play the 3 CP Cyan onto the field, and you pay 5 to gain 5 crystals, then you gain 5 crystals, and then like Sarah MOBIUS goes off like fireworks. It's just like bing, ding, 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 ding. Guess what? You have 5 autos on the stack now, so that's fun. All right, and I think this is the last question. I'm about to surprise myself in a second here if it's not the last question, but I think it is. It might be the second to last question. Anyway, Rala, just like lightning, is the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to rules questions. Because, oh no, we're on the second to last question. I just remembered. Haha. Question number 9. Rala is the gift that keeps giving, because there are so many questions about how Rala's effect works. It is not as complex as lightning, but it is still weird like lightning, and it does things in a way that we don't expect. So the question here is, if my opponent's Rala becomes dull while I control Gentiana, does Rala get to break a forward? I'll go through Rala first. Rala has both a field ability and an auto ability. It also has an action ability, but it's not important for this. The field ability is if you receive damage while Rala is active, dull Rala, and the damage becomes 0 instead. And then the auto ability is when active Rala becomes dull, choose one forward opponent controls, break it. Now, I guess the question doesn't specify taking damage, so it could be any situation where Rala became dull. So maybe we don't even have to worry about the field ability part of this, which is usually the thing that catches people up. So let's zoom in on the auto ability, which just says when active Rala becomes dull, choose one forward opponent controls and break it. And come up with your own scenario on how Rala became dull. Did Rala attack? Did Rala get dulled by an effect? Maybe you did take damage. I don't know, a number of reasons, but Rala became dull, and that would trigger the auto ability. Gentiana, on the other hand, has a field ability that says the dull forwards opponent controls lose their abilities. It's one of those deceptively simple wordings where it's like Gentiana has a lot of headache rules questions that have been asked over the years, despite the fact that her ability is, 7 words? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 words. Pretty short. So because Gentiana's ability is a field ability, it means that when a forward that your opponent controls becomes dull, it immediately loses its abilities. This is not something that uses the stack. This is not something that has any sort of delay. The moment that they become dull, they are poof, blank, no abilities. So the question here is that because the trigger event for Rala's ability is becoming dull, it's a fair question to ask, well, wait a second, became dull, which would trigger, but also when it became dull, it lost its abilities. So does it not trigger because now it became dull, it doesn't have abilities anymore? What gives here? What do we do? Luckily, this is a question that we have had before, well before Rala. It's been asked before with other cards, but the one I'm going to zoom in on for a second is the 2CP Dark Forward Twin Tania. So Twin Tania, like I said, 2CP Dark Forward, has an auto ability that says when active Twin Tania becomes dull, put a counter on it. I think it's a monster counter is what they call it. So same concept. When this forward becomes dull, put a counter on it. So that question has been asked specifically. Just like the same exact scenario, different ability. And the way it was ruled, the way they answered on Twitter, was they said that the auto ability still happens. It still triggers. And the reasoning they gave for it is because you have these two things happening simultaneously. When Rala becomes dull, simultaneously it is losing its abilities and the auto ability is triggering. So it is like the in one sense, this is the absolute last moment in time that the auto ability could have triggered before Rala didn't have the ability anymore, if you want to think of it that way, right? It's just like this picosecond in time where Rala becomes dull, both things happen. Both the abilities go away and the auto ability triggers. And we know that auto abilities, once they trigger, they're independent of their source. So even though Rala doesn't have the ability anymore, because it already triggered, it's still going to end up going on the stack. There's also been, I guess the other situation that's popped up with Gentiana is like when something declares an attack, it still gets, when this thing attacks, those auto abilities trigger. Well, that's a little bit different because you're like declaring the attack before you dull it, if I remember correctly. So there's like a little bit more of a delay there that makes it a little easier to understand. But in the Twin Tania example is literally the same exact thing as this, and they have said that it will still trigger just because those things are simultaneously happening. And so, basically it is triggering at the exact moment that it's losing its abilities. So, tricky one there, but that's how it works. Now on to the real last question, which is about Chocobo and Atomos. And the question here is, if I turn Atomos into a forward, play Chocobo, target Atomos, and Chocobo gains 4k power, then when Atomos stops being a forward, does Chocobo keep the 4k? This is a fun question. I like this question. It gets into just like really weird, nuanced rule stuff. So Chocobo has an auto ability. It says when Chocobo enters the field, choose one forward other than Job Chocobo or a card named Chocobo you control. As long as it is on the field, Chocobo gains plus 4,000 power. As a side note, I mean, obviously the concept here, both the art and the concept of it not being another Chocobo you're choosing, is that like you're picking another forward to ride on this Chocobo, and the idea of picking Atomos to ride on the Chocobo is like, I'd like to think objectively hilarious. Maybe it's subjectively, but I'm going to pretend it's objectively hilarious just to think of Atomos on top of the Chocobo. So yeah, enters the field, you choose another forward, and then while that forward's on the field, Chocobo gains plus 4,000 power. Now, the thing about Atomos is, of course, Atomos is one of these monsters that can turn into a forward, but is not a forward 24/7. So, assuming we were at damage 3 and could turn into a forward, the situation here is that before Chocobo entered the field, we were at 3 or more damage. Atomos is out. We activate Atomos, and now that resolves, and Atomos is a 7k power forward until the end of the turn. Then we cast Chocobo, or play Chocobo somehow, to the field. Chocobo enters. It says when it enters the field, choose one forward other than that you control. And you go, yeah, we're choosing Atomos because Atomos is a forward, right? Cool. So we chose Atomos, and now Chocobo gains 4,000 power for as long as Atomos remains on the field. Now, the snag here is that at the end of the turn, Atomos stops being a forward. Because its ability says that it's a forward until the end of the turn. So at the end of the turn, it stops being a forward. So the question here is, when it stops being a forward, what happens? Like, Chocobo was getting this 4k because Atomos was out, but now Atomos isn't a forward anymore. Like, does it lose the 4k when Atomos becomes a forward again? Is it now going to regain the 4k? How does that work, right? Because this ongoing effect on Chocobo, you can imagine if it was on something that was a little more, easy to understand, like just a regular forward, you'd like, okay, well, that forward, as long as it's on the field, we're just constantly giving Chocobo 4k. That's easy enough to understand. But here, with a forward that stops being a forward, does the whole thing like just disappear now? Does it just like go dormant? What happens? The interesting thing about effects like this is that now it does require the target to be a forward, because it says that. It says choose one forward other than Job Chocobo or card name Chocobo that you control. So that means when the auto ability goes on the stack, you need to have a valid target. And it means when the auto ability resolves on the stack, it means you need to have a valid target. But nothing about this effect, other than the choosing and the fact that it checks when it goes on the stack and when it resolves, nothing about it says that the thing you chose needs to stay a forward. Like, it doesn't require that. Like, it's not explicitly saying while it is a forward and on the field, right? It just says while it being the thing you chose, is on the field, Chocobo gains plus 4,000 power. So the neat thing here is that when Atomos stops being a forward, Chocobo still gets plus 4,000 power because Atomos is on the field. The rules don't care that Atomos isn't a forward anymore. It's like, yeah, that's fine. That's your buddy over there. And so because of that, Chocobo still gains 4,000 power. This is another one that was explicitly asked on Twitter. Full credit to Yo Caesar for being the one to take this question to Twitter just to confirm. They were pretty certain that that's how it's going to work, but every once in a while it's good to just kind of check in with Square on Twitter, because sometimes their answers change. and then we go, huh? And we have to figure out if the answers are actually changing or if they just got it wrong, because that never happens. Yeah, so the thing is, Atomos at that point is like the safest buddy for Chocobo ever, because it's hard to remove Atomos while it's not a forward, or it's harder while it's not a forward. There's less things that just break monsters in general. So yeah, Chocobo would just stay out there being a beefy 9k, like getting emotional support from Atomos, whether or not it's a forward. So that's pretty cool. And that's the final question. So that was our 10. I obviously lost track in the middle of it. Thought we were at 10, we were at 9, but that was 10. So if you were keeping track, you now have a score for yourself, and either congratulations or my condolences, depending on what your score was. But yeah, that's the end of this video, and which is a good thing, because I got to get ready for heading to Portland tomorrow for this weekend's Materia Cup, which is the first Materia Cup in the new era of Opus 26, so that'll be exciting. In the meantime, why don't you go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't. If you subscribed, then you haven't necessarily liked this video. So if you're watching this, you haven't liked it yet, probably, unless you liked it as soon as you clicked on it, in which case, dang, props to you. But if you could like this video, that would be awesome. And if you are not subscribed yet and you feel like hitting the subscribe button, that's also really cool. Last week when I made the video, I was not quite at 200 subscribers, and since then I have hit 200 subscribers. So a huge thank you to all 200 plus of you that are subscribed to me. You are all amazing. And not only that, but like I hit 200, and then between then and today, I just like blown right past it. I think I'm at 212 right now. So dang, I don't know if being that close just like really inspired people to be like, yeah, I'm gonna sub. But it's just a burst of them. So I was like, hey, I'm almost at 200. Next thing I was like, I'm at 212, which is awesome. So yeah, you can subscribe to me here on YouTube, where I am at Judge Jared. If you want to go check me out on Facebook, then on Facebook, I'm at facebook.com/Judge Jared. Yeah, I think it's just Judge Jared there. Yeah, just Judge Jared there. I can talk, I swear. So you can like my page over there and see things over there, like when I put up the questions from all these and the links to the timestamps for them. And you can also find me on Twitter, where I am at Judge Jared FFTCG. So you can go follow me on that, or tweet questions at me, or like the questions that I ask Square Enix, things like that. And you can also find me on Discord, where my username is Judge Jared, and you can ask me questions over there. My DMs are open. As I keep saying, they are open until somebody makes me regret that decision. So they're open. You can absolutely ask me questions about things, or give suggestions or any of that. You can comment on this video. I try my best to get back to everybody's comments on videos eventually. Sometimes it takes a little bit. But yeah, so that's all the places you can find me. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Discord. But yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to me ramble at the end of this. And yeah, I think we're going to call it that. As a reminder, you can go check out my fact-checking video. Checking up on those frequently asked questions from earlier in the week. Just get yourself as ready as possible for Opus 26, or if you're just looking for something to listen to in the background, it's a long video. I'll get you through a whole lot of, I don't know, housework or something. So that's going to do it for today. So thank you very much for watching. I'm Judge Jared, and until next time, court is adjourned.